want to welcome you all. Thank you for all coming out on such a snowy day. I lived in Los Angeles for about 20 years, so seeing the snow is quite unusual for me. But it is kind of beautiful out there. So today I'm here to talk about 10 rules for effective communication, and this comes from about 20 years of my traveling to Ukraine, working with Ukraine-based teams, both as a client and as the president of DevPro. So a little bit about myself. I've been, for the first 15 years or so, I was a client. I had some product-based software companies that I ran. One was called Graphic Corp that we ended up selling to Corel. Another one was called Custom CD that we sold to Digital River. And I was also a partner in Valideo Software, which I know some of you actually worked for. That was sold to Global Logic. And after that happened, I no longer had my development teams. So I said, let me turn things around and start my own company, which turned out to be DevPro. We now have about 210 people here in Ukraine. Actually, 209 in Ukraine, one in the US, and I'm the one in the US. So I have a lot of experience bridging the gap between teams in the Ukraine and teams in the US, or clients in the US. And we've learned a lot of things over the years. There's a lot of cultural differences between Ukraine and US, and I think a lot of that comes from kind of the history. This is a very historical building. I know it was a factory in the 1930s and 40s, and there's a lot of differences. There's a restaurant downstairs, which is quite good, that I visited a few times, and it just reminds me that when a US-based client or a US-based person goes to a restaurant in the US, they have a certain set of expectations of what the restaurant's going to be like, what customer service is going to be like, and then they come here and things are always a little bit different, and it's a challenge. So, I've tried to, when I come here, I try to train our people on, what the expectations are in the US and how it's different from the expectations in Ukraine, and help our people here adjust to those expectations of US-based clients. So at DevPro, let me talk about DevPro for a few minutes. We provide a full range of software development services: graphic design, markup development, software development, business analyst service, project management, QA, everything out there. But when I come here and I sit down with some new PMs, I ask them, what is it that we really sell? And I get a variety of answers. They say we sell software, we sell hours, we sell, a variety of things. But what I really say is we sell effective communication. That means we think about our clients, and our clients all have clients of their own. They have shareholders, they have stakeholders, they have bosses, they have their own clients, and the differentiation between an outsourced software development company here or in India or anywhere else is how do we provide our clients with the information they need, the updates, the effective communication that they can be successful, and when they compare us to others, they want to feel confident that DevPro is providing them what they need in order to be successful and not embarrass themselves. So a lot of our clients end up either having a bad experience somewhere else, or they've never outsourced before, and they're thinking, I'm not able to sit in the same room. I can't have direct one-on-one meetings all the time like I can with the people, my developers and my business analysts and project managers that are working in my same office. So how do I have the confidence that DevPro is going to provide us what we need to be successful? So think about your client. I may not be a typical person, but I'm traveling all the time, and a lot of our clients are the same way. They're at trade shows, they're on airplanes, they're always moving around. How do you structure your communication with those clients so that they get the information they need quickly? The client is overwhelmed with hundreds of emails, and when they're going through their inbox and replying to emails, if you can make it super simple for them to get the update, reply quickly, and move on, you're going to get answers faster. And when you get answers faster, projects get done faster. So a lot of what I'm going to show you is, it kind of came from one genesis, one moment that I remember specifically. I was on an airplane, and we're on the ground. We're taxiing to the runway, and I'm waiting for this email from my team. There's a project that needs to get started, but they need to get my approval. So I'm waiting, and the email comes in, but it was kind of a mess. It had a lot of bullet points. It had a lot of questions sprinkled throughout. It wasn't organized very well, and the plane starts to roll for a takeoff, and I'm sitting there trying to rapidly, reply to it and go down and scroll down and insert different comments, and I realized I can't do this effectively. The plane takes off. I'm in the air for 3 hours. I have a team of 6 or 8 people sitting there waiting for my answer. They don't get it, and we lose dozens of man hours until I finally landed, could log into my laptop, and answer this complex question. So I realized there's got to be a better way to do this. So we'll go through some of these ways, but there's a concept in journalism. It's called "don't bury the lead." What that means is when you're writing a story in a newspaper, you're not telling a mystery novel. You're not building suspense and starting off with vague details and working in more details and getting to the end and finally doing a big reveal of the answer or of the point of your email. Not burying the lead means put the lead of the story at the top. Put the important point at the top. Don't bury it down to the bottom. So the structure of an email, in this case, would be your conclusion at the top, then all the details of how you got to that conclusion, and then the conclusion again at the bottom. Also, it's very important. Answer all the questions that your client is asking, or your client is going to ask, before they ask them. So if you say we have 2 options, we have option A and option B. Okay, that's reasonable. But how about if you structure your email to say, if A, then this, if B, then that. Then your client doesn't have to say, tell me about A, tell me about B, and you don't lose that time. So there's a concept in manufacturing called cycle time. It's how long does it take for the machine to cycle one time to get one product? And if you can shorten that cycle time, you can make more products. It's the same thing in the software development. If every project is a series of 100, 1,000, 10,000, maybe 100,000 points of communication, emails back and forth, Slack chats, Skype chats, and if you can cut a minute or an hour or a day off of each of those points of communication, you can get projects done much faster. So this is just an example of an email where you put as much information as you can in the subject line. So the client, as they're scrolling through their inbox, they may actually, they see the priority of this. They know there's an approval required. And then when they open it up and they're on their iPhone, they don't even have to scroll down. They know exactly what this is about. If they know the details, they can just reply okay, and then they don't even have to read the rest. But if they have questions, they go down and read the rest of the email. So you put the point of the email at the top. So something that we do at DevPro that I alluded to before is learn how to write what I call OK emails. 2 letters, OK. Everything is in the email. It's organized. It doesn't have bullet points. It has numbers. And it also has something we call continuous numbering. So if you have 2 sections, instead of numbering it 1 through 4 in the first section and then 1 through 4 in the second section, you number it 1 through 4 and 5 through 8. The reason for that is the client can reply and say, if they say number 4, it's very clear you mean the number 4 in the first section. Otherwise, they have to say, well, it's number 4, but it's the second section, number 4. It can be confusing. Same thing with bullet points. How do you refer to the second bullet point from the bottom? It's better to just use numbering. And then also, let's see. So here's just an example. A longer email, the client can very quickly at the top, without scrolling down, tell you what they're talking about or what they need more discussion on. This is something else that I get extremely frustrated with because I travel all the time. On the left is actually a great email. It's from Southwest Airlines, and let's say you have 4 or 5 flight reservations. They put all the information you need in the subject line. So when you're searching or sorting your emails, you can quickly see, okay, that's my flight on the 20th. I know where it's going from and to, and I don't even have to open it up. On the other hand, Radisson Hotels, they just say, your confirmation, and then they have this long email, and all the details are at the bottom of the email. So if I've got 4 or 5 hotel reservations, I need to actually open each one, scroll down, figure out where it is, which hotel, what the dates are, and we try to extend the same concept to our emails. Put as much information as possible in the subject line. If I get that email on the left, I don't even have to open it. I know exactly that everything passed, everything's great. I just, move on. But if I get the one on the right, I'm thinking, what does that mean? I have to open it, I have to scroll through it, and through, 400 or 500 emails a day, it can become very tedious. So we don't always do everything right, unfortunately, and that's why I come and I work with our people and I train. And just was thinking about it's actually a question that was asked in the last speaker. What happens when when there's lack of communication, when you're not getting feedback from clients, when you're not, when it's hard to get, everyone's busy, it's hard to get your clients to answer, and it's the same thing on our side, where sometimes we just, we get a request, and we had this problem a few weeks ago. The client said, our site is down, there's a problem, it's mission critical, we have to get it back up, and we start working. We ended up spending, over a weekend, lots of overtime hours, lots of extra time, but we didn't really communicate with the client. We didn't get back to them and say, yes, the site is down, it's not our fault, but we're going to do what we can to fix it. We just jumped in there to get the problem fixed, and at the end, we said, great, we have everything back up, and it took 300 hours, and they said, great, I'm glad you did that for us. I appreciate that you dealt with your problem. And we said, wait, our problem? This was your problem. And they said, no, it wasn't. And unfortunately, it was too late for us to negotiate whose responsibility this was, and we had to end up eating a lot of time. And what that means is, when you get an email, you need to reply right away. You have to, yes, I received your email, we're working on it. You can't just be silent and assume that everyone's assumptions are the same. So here's an example. In the U.S., I see this not just in software development, but in many things. In my personal life, I'm chasing someone to get an answer. It takes me 3 or 4 days, emails and calls and everything, and then I finally reach them, and they say, "Oh, sorry, I didn't get back to you. I just didn't know the answer." Well, I don't know, but I will by Thursday. That's an answer. So that's what we tell our people that we need to do. When you receive an email, the first thing you do is you respond to it, and you say, got it, I'm working on it, and here's when you'll have your answer. Don't just wait and assume that because you don't know that there's nothing to update the client on. And then if a client gets back to you and says, please give me a status update, then you, as a project manager, a BA, or a dev lead, you have failed in your job. Your job is to keep the clients up to date before they ask you what's going on. So that could be sometimes just a quick Skype message, a message in Slack, whatever it is. Think about the time zone differences here. So when your client, let's assume your client's in California, and they send you an email at 5 p.m. their time, they go out to dinner, they go to sleep, and then they wake up, and first thing they do is they grab their phone, they check their emails, and they realize, wait, there's no answer here. So what's going on? And they start to get nervous, and they start to think, did you miss the email? Are you not working on it? And then they start to get concerned. They reach out to you. They reach out to your boss. This can all be adjusted by just being more proactive. Over communicate. Don't wait for them to be asking questions for you, and keep them updated throughout the day. Especially when there are problems, if there are issues that come up during the day, that's when they really start to get nervous, and they want constant updates. So. Every project has problems from one time or another, but it's not the problem itself, it's how you deal with the problem. And if you can be upfront about the problem, you can be cooperative with your client and help them reset expectations. So like I said, every client has a boss, they have shareholders, stakeholders, whatever it is. If they are, if you've got a deadline at 6 p.m., hope is not a strategy. You can't hope that you're going to meet the deadline, and if you miss the deadline, then you deal with it. You don't update people at 6 p.m. deadline. You don't update them at 5:55 or at 6:30. Say, oh, we missed the deadline. Sorry. If you update them, first thing in the morning, once you realize there's a problem, then you can add more resources. Maybe you can, you can reduce the scope. You can negotiate a different deadline. Your client can talk to their client. They can reset expectations, and you don't necessarily end up with failure if everyone's aware of what's going on. That's what gives your clients comfort that you know what you're doing as a professional and as a team. And without that, you can very quickly lose their confidence. So what I tell my team is it's very, 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 very hard to get a new client, but it's very, 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 very easy to lose a client. So when you lose the confidence of your client, it's really hard to get that back. You can spend a little bit of time up front, and you can save hours or days or weeks of agony on the back end trying to fix a problem that you created. The third point here, warning a client doesn't mean they heard you. So everyone's busy. They get hundreds of emails, dozens of messages. Just because you said something 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then said, "Oh, we have a risk here," don't expect that they really internalize that. And also, if they don't respond to you, if they don't acknowledge that email, it's as if it didn't exist. A lot of clients don't want to respond to an email because then they're responsible for it. They ignore the email, and if they feel like, well, if I don't respond to this, then something goes wrong, I can say, oh, it wasn't my problem. It becomes your problem. So you need to be following up with the clients. You need to be ensuring that they actually acknowledge this issue, and if they don't acknowledge it, you can get pretty pushy, in my opinion. You should get pretty pushy, because otherwise you're responsible for it. And then another thing that frustrates me is, don't at 5 p.m. on a Friday write to your client and say, "I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to finish it, today. We'll get it to you by Monday. Is that okay?" Don't do that unless you have a plan for them to say, "No, it's not okay." So if they say, "No, it's not okay," say, "All right, well, we've already arranged that we can have some people work over the weekend, and we'll get it done." So don't ask them if something is okay, and then they say, "No, it's not," and you say, "Well, sorry, there's nothing I can do about it." It happens far too frequently. So, when you're identifying risks, make sure that you get a response, from the client, and don't. I also see many emails that put the risk at the bottom of the email. Well, the client may not read that whole email. They may think, okay, fine, and they just stop reading. And then you point out later, you say, "Oh, well, you saw that risk. It was at the very bottom, right?" And they're going to say, "No, I didn't see it." All right, so at DevPro, we put a couple of processes in place to ensure, as best we can, that these types of problems either don't happen or we're able to address them proactively. We have a process or a email alias, info@dev-pro.net. That copies myself, the president, our CTO, our COO, and our CPO, Chief Process Officer. on virtually every email that goes outside of the company. That leads to the hundreds of emails I get. I don't read every single email, but myself and the other members of the management team are scanning those emails as they come in. They look for keywords like issue, problem, unhappy, delay, risk. So when I see an email from a client that has one of those words in it, I say, whoa, let me read through this and understand it. And that way, I'm also prepared. So let's say a client calls me and says, what's going on? We're going to miss that delivery. And if I wasn't copied on these emails, I would say, I don't know what you're talking about. And let me go find out. Well, it's after hours, and I have to be calling people at home. Otherwise, I'm on top of what's going on. And I also, many times, will be aware that it wasn't necessarily our problem. Maybe it was, but it might have been the client's problem. But if the client is hot, they're upset, they're yelling at me, I may make a concession to that client based on what they're saying without any evidence to refute what they're saying. So it can be very expensive also. So it's better for us to be aware of what's going on. A client, writes us or calls and says, hey, there's a problem, and we say, I'm on it, I'm aware, I've already started taking steps to address it. So this is another thing that's very important, and I encourage all of you to look at devpro.net/drafts. There's a process we have which is called draft emails. And it can be frustrating for people at times, I understand that. We don't let a new person, a new PM or BA or dev lead just, join DevPro and start writing to clients directly, on their own. Instead, we have a process by which I'll show you what a draft email looks like. In the subject line, it says draft. It has who's the expected approvers. And then it's the exact email that our person on our team is going to write to the client. There's a lot of issues usually with new project managers or new people writing these emails. They either don't represent us as a company the way we want to be represented. They make statements that we don't want to stand behind. So we go back and forth. So a new PM, when they start writing these draft emails, it may take 4 or 5 times back and forth before one of us in the management team is comfortable with that email. But it's a training tool on one side. So we train our people on what it is, what are the standards that we want to have. We also, many times as managers have more knowledge than our staff. We know things, we could try different things, or suggest that we try different things before we reply to the client. This gives us an opportunity to go back and forth before the email gets sent. Because once that email is sent, the last thing you want to do is go back to the client and say, well, we don't agree with what our project manager said, and I have to say no, that we can't do that. That's very embarrassing. So a few minutes of time at the beginning can save hours, days, or weeks of effort on the back end trying to fix a problem. So this is what a draft email is. We also use it internally. So let's say we have a new social benefit that we're thinking about. One of our management team will there's 2 ways to do it. We could either call a meeting, but since I'm in the US, that's a little more difficult. I can't actually sit in the same room, so we can do it over Skype or whatever. Or the management manager on our side can come up with whatever the details of that social benefit are and write it up as an email to our internal staff. And then they send it as a draft, maybe with some information at the top saying, I'm thinking about adding this social benefit. Here's how I'd present it to our team. And we've saved a bunch of time then. We can comment on it, we can reject it, we can accept it, we can comment on it, but we know exactly how it's presented, and we've saved several cycles of communication versus another way, which would be have the meeting, someone writes it up, and then circulates it around. So I think that if more companies did something like this, use these draft emails, there'd be fewer problems on a project. I just don't see that happening, and I encourage you to take a look at our various rules and documents there. It can be a little overwhelming at times. We've built a lot of processes, but they're evolving. We do change them over time, but these are things that you might take back to your company. You use some of them, you don't use others, but it could be something that's useful. So a lot of times people can get overwhelmed by our process, and they can think that the process is the goal, but the result is the goal. So, making sure that you achieve the goal, super critical. And getting back to an earlier point, don't leave topics open. Don't assume that because the client received or was sent an email that they accepted your results. You can't send an email to someone and say, we're going to do this, this, and that. Is that okay? They don't respond. You do it, and you say, well, I sent you that email, and they say, well, that doesn't mean I agree with it. If a client sends you an email with 5 questions, I see this all the time. In our draft emails, one of our PMs will answer 4 of the questions, and won't answer the 5th because they missed it, because they were not, they didn't know the answer to it. Well, you can't miss a question. If there's 5 question marks in your client's email, there should be 5 answers on your side. Here's another super important one that's affected me personally. Number 4. You're working all day on a project. You get to the end of the day. You send the email to your client, and then you say, I've got the theater tickets. You head out the door. You turn off your phone because you're going to the theater, and then the client gets the email. They can't open the attachment. All right, then it's happened to me. I'm then trying to reach my developer. The developer's unavailable. I call the person that sits next to him. Oh, he's out of the office. I'm calling mobile phones. I lost 45 minutes of chasing someone down for a very simple question. Resend that attachment. Or, client might have one last question, or the numbers don't add up. There's a math problem in your email. There's all kinds of little things that happen. So if you do have to leave, send the client a message on Skype or however you communicate and say, did you get that email? Everything look okay? 40% of the time, there's one last little thing I found. So don't just send the email and leave. Give a little bit of time, or double check with the client that they received everything they needed, and and you're good to go. This is an example. They haven't responded to you. You got to keep bugging them. They're avoiding you is because they're trying to CYA, cover your ass is what they're trying to do. Don't let them do that. It becomes your responsibility. That can be extremely expensive in the long run if things start to go sideways. And they start blaming you, and you say, but I told you that, and they said, well, telling me and my accepting it are 2 different things. All right, here's another thing. I know it drives my team crazy, but emails need to look good, not just the content. They need to be structured. They need to be organized. They need to be spell checked. Don't use. I get emails like this all the time from Indian outsource companies. They have, everything's in red, and then there's different fonts, and it's just all messy, and there's no signature block, and, I'm just like, what's going on? So let's say you've got 2 candidates for a job, and you receive 2 resumes, and one is organized and spell-checked, and it looks good, and the candidates are the same. They're even the same person, but you get a second one, and it's messy, and you find typos, and you're like, wait, this doesn't make sense. The candidate is the same person even, but which one are you going to hire? You're going to hire the one that looks organized, because your client, they can't be in your room with you. They can't be sitting there looking over your shoulder at everything you're doing. So they can only evaluate you based on what they see. And if the communications you have with them are messy and unorganized, they're going to assume the rest of what you're doing is messy and unorganized. So it is very important. We also handle this through the draft process. More than one person looks at most emails. And that means we catch small typos. We catch, misuse of idioms and just other things that are confusing to a client. It's really something that I encourage you to think about. It's not just the content of the email, it's the email itself that can make a difference. So we're all here in Ukraine, part of Europe. Let's assume your clients are in the US, which I know a lot of people have US-based clients. The currency formats, the number formats are different. The date formats are different between Europe and the US. So let's think about dates. If you write 0602, when is that? Is that February 6th or is that June 2nd? you can have huge problems from misusing date formats. Think about where your client is located and try to adjust your formatting of dates and currencies to their standard. If they're in the Pacific time zone, just put all your time. Say it'll be done at, at 6:30, but say 6:30 PST. And that way they understand it's their time zone, not your time zone at 6:30. If you can standardize that within the company, you'll eliminate a lot of problems. Also, we had a problem where we're working with a mobile app. We're developing it, and our developer put in a European time zone or a time format, and date format. They expected a U.S. date format. If you just try to standardize with your organization that we put times and dates and currencies in your client's expectation, you'll end up being more successful. So we had a client come visit us a couple weeks ago, and we had some great meetings. It was really a positive experience, and at the end, he told us something that I'll always remember, which is that you at DevPro worry about these things so I don't have to, and that makes a huge difference. Our job is to make our client's life easier. So if you can do that, you're going to expand your cooperation with that client. You've made them a hero. You've solved their problems. Don't make them be stressed. Don't make them think that it's, whatever time at night and they haven't heard from you and they want to, stay up until midnight so they can call you and make sure everything's okay. Give them the confidence that everything that you're doing is positive and helpful, and you'll get more work and you'll have happier clients. So I want to thank everyone for coming. I appreciate it, and I'll take some questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Now you have an option to ask a question.
First of all, Jeff, thank you very much. Have a proposition for you. Maybe we can go ahead and outsource you to various customer service departments with that same message, because it's not just software development, then exactly what you've been talking about. We heard about Agile earlier and the difficulties that we have with our clients, et cetera, et cetera. One of the big components of Agile is co-location, and of course, you're not able to actually go ahead and perform that co-location. How do you get around that one?
I'm sorry, co-location in what context? I want to...
that everyone is located at the same place.
Right. That's... When I was... my first company, I was in the U.S., in Los Angeles, which I know you're from, and I had 10 or 15 or 20 people in my office in the U.S., and I had a team of 10 or 15 people over here, and I realized that if I'm not sitting in the same office, then whether the person is across town or the person is in San Diego, which is 200 kilometers from Los Angeles, it doesn't matter whether, if I'm not actually sitting right there, they might as well be in Ukraine. So I had my second company, and I said, well, I'm going to have the team in Portland, and I'll be in Los Angeles. Portland was less expensive at the time, and then a team in Ukraine, and things ended up working pretty well. If you set up standards of communication, if you set up standards of behavior where you can predict what your coworkers are going to do, you don't need to be physically in the same location, and that's what we're selling, at DevPro is we want to be a member, a part of your team. And just because we're not sitting in the same place, we can still be effective and take advantage of the time zones. Time zones become a benefit, not a hindrance, when you're organized that way. Right. So 2 questions. One is, how many customers do we have? At DevPro, we have about 30 clients. It ranges from our largest project has over 50 people working on it, and then we have some clients that we just do occasional work for. So, we have a range in size of clients. Second question is about emails that presume the answer or the acceptance. we're going to do A, B, and C unless we hear from you otherwise. No, that doesn't work, unfortunately. That is just a recipe for disaster, because if everything goes great, it's no problem. But if something goes wrong, they're going to say, I didn't receive the email, I don't agree, I don't accept it. You have to get a response. The client has to reply to you, and there's an escalation. You can continue. You can be ask the question via email, or then you can get on Skype and send a Skype chat. You can start calling their mobile phone. You can call their boss. You can say, we are blocked here. We can't move forward without an answer. So if you don't do that, you're going to be left holding responsibility of the problem.
Thank you for the topic. I have one question. If the client, for example, writes email and it's midnight in Ukraine, what shall I do? Shall I answer accept like within 15 minutes or later, like when we have morning?
That's a very good question. You need to train your clients at some level. So if you are available all the time, they will ask you questions all the time. So what we do is during the pre-sale process, we say clients on the East Coast of the U.S., we're generally available till noon, 12 PS or EST, and the client comes back and says, "Great, can we talk at 4 o'clock?" We have a decision to make at that point. Yeah, we could probably do that call late at night and try to get the client, but then the client starts to get trained that they don't understand the difference between Ukraine's time zone and their time zone. You're asking for trouble. So it's better to set the expectations properly up front. We do have people that work late. It's fine. If you want, we don't make people respond to emails at midnight, and sometimes it may be required, but if you make a habit of it, your clients will make a habit of asking, and you're just going to end up with problems.
Hi, Jeff. The question is, with all those drafting system and strict standards, do you think there's a room for a personal touch in that business communication? Should a manager kind of establish informal communication with his client? What's your opinion on that?
So humor and idioms, they don't always translate. And, at the beginning, we strongly prefer a more formal approach, but we also encourage clients to come visit us, go out for a beer, build that personal relationship, and then you can build a little of that more into your communication, as you get to know the client a little bit better. But we oftentimes, when we see the drafts and we see lots of smiley faces and other stuff, we take it out because it can be misunderstood. So I'm not saying everything has to be strictly formal. Certainly at the beginning, you want it to be. Companies also get in a lot of trouble. A Skype chat log or a Slack chat log, that is legally, actionable. If you say things, and this happens all the time, if you're writing things that are sexually suggestive or, whatever, you think it's ephemeral, it's just going to disappear. It doesn't. It stays there. So keep things professional. You can be a little lighter, as you get to know the client. If your client is a lighter person, not every client wants to be, treated that way. A lot of times they're like, this is by the book. So, you have to measure it on a case-by-case basis, but just be careful. Don't dive in there and assume that everyone's going to understand your sense of humor.
Hi, Jeff. There was a good point in your presentation about follow-up on goals until achieved. Yep. And I have a question. We have a probably project-specific, but we keep communicating with the client on a daily basis, and each day we might get new goals to achieve. And these goals usually involve a lot of effort. And for example, after 1 month, you are getting a long list of goals, and you don't have time to achieve all of them, as, for example, requested. Yeah. So as a result, we end up with a long list of not achieved items, and in some time follow-up, we just stop follow-up on them, and clients just forgot about or keep forgetting about them, and nothing happens. So what would be the advice?
You're lucky if they forget, because they don't normally forget. That's the problem. We're running into that same problem right now. Client has a very strict deadline. They have an ever-changing list of requirements, and we have to have a very serious conversation with them and say, if you want us to be successful as a group, this is not about us versus you. We need to agree on the fixed scope during that deadline, and we will do whatever we can to meet it. But if you keep making changes, you can't evaluate us based on a changing scope. It's a very difficult situation because there's always, just one more thing, and clients don't always understand. They think a certain change, is. We had this issue yesterday. Why is designing an error message take this amount of time? Well, if you want to reuse that throughout the whole product, that is this huge product, it needs to be flexible. It needs to do all these things. So don't let your clients, especially the non-technical ones, drive a set of requirements that are unrealistic. You're going to be the one that's holding the responsibility for it. You need to push back on it, and don't wait till the end to push back. If you've got a month or two, until the delivery, that's the time to start pushing back. Set the expectations. Make sure everyone's talking the same language that was referred to earlier. When you're dealing with non-technical people and you're a technical person, we try not to deal with non-technical clients because we just can't even explain why certain things are important. So, push back on it and try to have a common language, common understanding of what the goals are.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you, everyone.